All right, we are live. Silver Doctors live on air. It is Friday, the 27th day of the month of December, and we are excited to be back for another live stream. So welcome. My name is Mike, the co-host. I got my better half here, Mr. Half Dollar. How are we doing this afternoon, my friend?
Doing good today, Mike. Hope you had a Merry Christmas and are enjoying the holidays here. And welcome, everybody, for tuning back in this beautiful Friday.
Oh, yeah. So everything went well, apart from just being down and out a little bit weather-wise. But other than that, I'm back up and running. So let's have some fun with it today. So a lot of things to talk about. We're going to get right into it. So let me acknowledge a couple people who are tuning in via chat, and then we can go from there. So it looks like a lot of people tuned in. We got SCT PC says, thus should be something 3 a.m. That's crap. Okay, we got Dark Helmet. We got Silver for me. We got Rogue Silver. All right, so a lot of people tuning in thus far. So let's get right into it. So, Mr. Half Dollar, how do you want to kick this off this afternoon?
Well, where I'd like to kick this off this afternoon is going to be with the Secure Act. Have you heard about the Secure Act yet, Mike?
I have scanned across it, yes. Didn't dive into it, but definitely it's something worthy of talking about. Go ahead.
So I'm not an expert on it. I just only want to bring up three different points about it. But the Secure Act was basically pushed in with the whole spending bill, that $1.4 trillion spending bill that we've been talking about. So this was coupled in with it that President Trump signed. So this is actually going to be a law taking effect on January 1st. Now, the title of this, because they always come up with the fancy names, right, is called the Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act. Oh, man. So, like, the real title of that means setting every community up for failure, right? Because the government either gets in the way or they get out of the way.
Yeah.
But, so there's two things that I want to talk about because this is important because this has to do with, like, retirements and pensions and things like that. But here's the angle that I want to talk about, and it's kind of probably different than the angle that most people want to talk about. But there's two things, and this is why I came up with this title of saying, are we going to be held off for 18 months here? Because there's two things in the Secure Act that I want to talk about. The first thing is Section 106. And Section 106, what that does is that it repeals the prohibition on contributions to IRAs, right? So basically what that means is there was in place something where if you're older than 70 and a half years old, you can't keep investing in this, right? But now they're saying, nope, you can invest as old as you want. So just keep on investing in stocks, keep on investing in stocks, right? Like, so that's number one. And then number two, right, it raises the minimum age for when you have to start taking distributions, right? So the government says at a certain age, you have to start withdrawing from your retirement account. Now, currently it's at 70 and a half, but with this new law, with this new bill, it's raised to 72, right? So there's that 18 months right there. So what that means is, not only can you invest in stocks, just keep on buying stocks until you're 80 years old, just keep buying stocks. Not only can you invest in stocks later in life, but you don't have to start, taking your retirement funds until later in life also. So what does that do? That keeps people in the stock market longer, right? So to me, these are just a couple little quick quirks of the government just trying to buy time, just trying to keep this thing, you talk about it. I think the thing that you say is trying to keep it held together for just a little bit longer, however they can. But then the most important thing, and this is the key takeaway that I want to make, that I get from this, is just the simple fact that what does this shows? This shows that the government will fight for its own survival and change the rules as necessary when it needs to change those rules in its favor. So that's just what I wanted to start out there with. And then if you want to take a sinister look at it, you could say, well, that's so all these people can just unload their shares to all these 80-year-olds that somehow got stuck in the stock market still because they bought into this. So that's what I wanted to start out with there, Mike. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that right now we got all-time, I'm seeing tweets or whatever, President Trump just tweeted about all-time high with stock market and whatnot. So everything is very timely heading into this new year. So it looks like, I remember talking a couple weeks ago about trying to figure out how this year would end. Will it end in a very bearish fashion or a bullish fashion? And it looks like they want to set us up for 2020 in a very favorable way with this whole market rally as well as this Secure for Failure Act. So I'm not surprised at all, but what it tells me is that the higher it goes, the more uncomfortable it's going to be when it corrects. And so it's one of the things where you can do all you want to do to kick the can down the road to further this manipulated world we're in, but it's only going to bring more pain and devastation down the end. So whatever they want to do it, sure, have your way with it.
Yes, it's delaying the economic day of reckoning. And you're right, just today, all of the major indices, brand new stock market highs, again, just today. So right now, there's absolute total market euphoria going on in the stock markets. So, and the tweets are more than just daily. There's several times a day now. So, but the bottom line there is just that, this is not really good when you're looking at it. And then the word every, right? Every community. The federal government wants to get down in every single community. It kind of reminds me when I was running the homeless shelter and the soup kitchen in the early aughts. And, the big thing the federal government was pushing was for every community to come up with a 10-year plan to end homelessness, right? And this is in the early 2000s, so we see how that ended up, right? So, so this is just not good either way around. There's a lot of other things there that, the mainstream press is writing about, and a lot of it has to do with like tax implications and inheritance and all this and all that. And I haven't even looked into it that much, but those are just two things that struck me as a way for the government just to buy a little bit more time. So that's all I really wanted to say about that.
Interesting. Yeah. So I saw something. I'm not sure, as I mentioned, I was down and out for about a day or two, but I saw something about, I think it was a tweet or some type of something or another mentioning that President Trump referenced that if the whole situation in California isn't fixed or addressed somehow, some form of fashion, he was going to make it a federal issue where the government, United States government, was going to come in and help with the homelessness situation. Now, did you see something about that, or?
Yeah, I did. I can't remember where I saw it, but I did see something like that.
So I'm thinking it's interesting now that that Skid Row situation in California, where this unimaginable amount of homeless people, it's about to be addressed, where President Trump now has pretty much made it look what looks like a priority at this point. So we'll see how that plans out.
Yes, it is very interesting. So anyway, what we talked about there was something for the older generation, right? Because we're talking about retirement, we're talking about investing later in life. Now let's switch it just a little tiny bit and talk about millennials for a second. This is from just this morning. Two things struck me from this, and this is the one about the average millennial. I don't know if you have that one link that I sent you there.
I have it, yep. Go ahead.
So there's just a couple things that stick out to me at this. The average millennial has a subprime credit score. That is not good. That is not good. In a debt-based fiat currency economy, that has to rely on ever-expanding credit, when the average millennial has subprime credit, that is not good. Wow. Then the other thing that struck me out with this as interesting is that the average, and I don't know where they're getting this information from, I guess from FICO, right? But they're saying millennials have an average total debt of $80,666. The average millennial has $80,000 in debt. That's just off the chain, like.
Wow, that is interesting. So I'm looking at this graph here, and I see that it says the average FICO score for both millennial and the younger Generation Z generation is below 669. That level defines subprime borrowers. Wow, that's interesting. So not only are millennials and the younger Generation Z, at a much worse point in their current life, life cycle than their parents and their parents ever could have imagined being. But think about this: how do you start a future when you don't have any type of foundation whatsoever? And in a society that's built upon credit and consumption, if you're starting off below the bell curve there, then what? Then what do you have to build on? If your score is so bad to where, so clearly what's going to happen? They're going to have to move. They're going to have to move the what you call it? Move the bar down further to accommodate those people who are subprime borrowers. So think about this: if we thought it was easy to get credit this last decade, this next decade, it's going to be they'll give you credit and give you money on top of it, more than likely.
Yes, you got no job, that's okay. You can get a 100-year mortgage and you can finance it 2.2% interest. I mean, this is to buy a house. This is what we're coming to. So yeah, that is not good one way or another. And talk about starting off, on the wrong footing. How do you even recover from this stuff, right? And it's interesting because this week I'm starting to hear a lot more just about resets and debt jubilee. That's starting to become the talk again. So I think that when we move into 2020, we'll start start hearing more about debt jubilees and stuff like that again, because it's obvious that everything is just out of control with that now.
Yeah. I would agree. Let's check into the chat real quick and see if there's any thoughts or whatnot. As always, if you guys are interested, feel free to highlight at Silver Doctors. And I see a thought there from Mr. Low Blood Pressure, so let's touch on that one. It says, guys, how do you guys keep the enthusiasm? I get burned out waiting for the silver moon shot. For me personally, low blood pressure, it's not hard to keep the enthusiasm just because I've been covering these problems for so long. I've become used to them. And so I'm past the point of just focusing on the problems. I'm more so looking at trying to find something positive out of all of this. And I think by all this chaos gives us more time to awaken more people and hopefully find new ways of reaching those that are still asleep. So it's one of the things. I'm not a doom and gloomer, so it's hard for me to get down and out. I'm used to this stuff by now.
Well, I am a doom and gloomer, I guess you could say, but on the other side of that, I'm trying to educate people, right? Because I want people to learn this stuff because they're not going to get it anywhere else. And quite frankly, it does get to me, right? So just, stuff builds up and I bite my tongue and then I just let it all out in some massive rant that I write. And fortunately I have, a soapbox where I can do that. So that's just because you can't let it get to you, right? You can't let it because, we don't know when that moment comes where they can't deliver that metal, right? We don't know when that moment's going to come. We know we're close. We just don't know, exactly how much metal there is. Right. So the moonshot's coming, but exactly when, unless you're on the inside, and I mean on the real inside, that's not something that anybody's going to know.
Right. At the end of the day, for those that are watching us, you're watching because you're aware of what's going on. But think about this. There's only a little bit over 200 people watching right now in a country where there's 300 million, on a planet where there's 7-point-something billion. We haven't reached enough people. So there's always going to be opportunity for us to continue to try to put the word out there. And so it boils down to you guys, the audience out there, helping us by sharing these videos, getting other people involved so that they're able to come across this type of information. So our job will never be done as far as just trying to awaken as many people as we can.
Yep, that's correct.
So let me see. Now, go ahead.
Now, we kind of start talking about credit and stuff like that with the millennials. Just in general, credit. MasterCard came out with a report yesterday about this year's holiday spending. So this is just kind of like a follow-up comment on something we were talking about a couple weeks ago. But what MasterCard is saying is that holiday sales from November 1st through the 24th, I think it is, that they're doing, retail sales grew 3.4%. So here's my question with that, right? And hopefully, there's someone in the chat who's, a statistician who can do the math for us because half dollar isn't doing this kind of math, right? But, if retail sales went up 3.4%, right, there's a couple flip sides to that. One of the flip sides is department store sales declined 1.8%. But then the point that I wanted to make is that online sales, and this is just fresh off the presses, right, grew 18.8%. So my question is, because these are aggregate sales, right? So aggregate sales means I'm assuming that includes sales tax that's paid, right? Because they're just seeing how much is charged and then the type of store, right? Yeah. But they're not breaking it down even further than that. So I guess my question is 18.8% rise in online sales, if you take that into consideration, but then if you take into consideration the fact that 2019 was the big year that all the online retailers started collecting sales tax, does that offset that 3.4% retail sales gain for this holiday shopping season? So, we keep bringing that up because, I was watching this little interview and it was like either on CNBC or Yahoo Finance or something. And they're talking about, oh, this is great, but they just avoid completely, the uncomfortable nature that, taxes are now being collected on online sales.
Yeah.
So
interesting. So yeah, I've noticed over this past week when I happened to be making my last minute efforts to go shopping, there wasn't a lot of people out there. I didn't have to wait in any lines whatsoever when it came time to go stand in line. So I've noticed that over the last couple of years, there's not many people in stores. So definitely, yeah, either people aren't shopping or they're shopping online. But yet I don't think online, even though I know online is booming, but still, yeah. What about all the brick and mortar stores? Like, what will happen to those stores as we move further to this next decade, where online shopping becomes more prevalent and the old model of shopping stores are no longer utilized? And then what? So. Yeah.
And remember, it's that brick and mortar stuff that's like the foundation of the economy in and of itself, because, you got people that have to get there. They have to get gas for their car to get to that job. They have to eat somewhere or they have to bring in their lunch. There's all this economic activity around the fact that retail stores exist, right? So when you remove that, sure, some of it gets transferred into some other ways, but just on net, you're losing overall when it comes to the real economy, as opposed to like the virtual online e-commerce type of economy.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I wonder, have you noticed, and I'm also curious as for those that are watching, when it comes to the American shopping mall. And so I can testify that over the last couple of decades in the Metro Detroit area, especially, all the major malls that were very popular and pretty much overcrowded when I was a kid are no longer there. And so we have a mall called Northland, which is torn down. We have a mall called Eastland, which was partially torn down and turned it into just one store. We got Macomb Mall, which is closing. And then just last week they closed. They sold a mall out in the suburbs somewhere because, once again, most of the stores are not being occupied. And so the American mall structure, as I was doing a little research, in the 1970s, as we entered into that fiat credit expansion world of ours, is when all those malls began being built. Therefore, they're all now being torn down in my area. So I wonder out there, are a lot of people also recognizing and seeing the same event occurring, given the fact that online sales is picking up, as well as just the old conventional style of shopping is dying out. But I'm curious to find out via chat, how many people are witnessing those big malls closing in their areas? And let me know what cities, what areas. I'm curious to find out.
Yeah, that's a great point you make up too. I'm curious to find out too, because, I lived in North Carolina for many years. In the mall that I used to go to in Durham, North Carolina, I think it was called South Square Mall. That mall, that was where we used to go they had an arcade there, and we used to go ditch school to go to the arcade and all sorts of good stuff like that. That mall has been torn down, and I guess there's apartments or something there now. But yeah, I'm seeing that same exact thing, which brings up an interesting point about malls in general. I don't know if this was last year or 2017 or exactly which year that this was, but recently, within the last couple of years, did you hear about that mall in Pittsburgh that was auctioned off?
I did not.
Okay. Well, there was a mall in Pittsburgh that was auctioned off, and there's just a couple interesting things about this, right? Guess what the mall auctioned off for, the price for a shopping mall in Pittsburgh?
Less than $1 million.
$100. $100. Guess who bought this mall? And here's where this financialization comes in. Wells Fargo bought this mall, right? Now, here's my point with that. And this is that sneaky stuff that these banks and things are doing. Wells Fargo, I'm pretty sure, was like the leaseholder on that mall, right? So what are they doing? They're buying the mall for $100, but they're not marking it down on their books, so they're still putting it on the books at $100 million or whatever the mall was worth, right? So just sketchy stuff that's going on there. But yeah, that was a mall in Pittsburgh. It auctioned off for $100, and Wells Fargo bought it, and they were the ones that had the lease on it, so it's obvious why they bought it, so they didn't take those losses on their books.
Yeah, interesting. So as you're describing that, I was looking at in the chat, and so it says there's a lot of people talking about malls in the area. And so somebody says let me see here. I saw something about Colorado Springs. Our malls are low traffic. And so they said the indoor malls are closing in my area and outdoor malls are replacing them. So yeah, I think there's one outdoor mall or shopping complex type of situation that is taking traffic away from that mall that was just recently sold out in the suburbs area. So yeah, they're tweaking how they're trying to reach the public, it looks like. So we got a really big outlet type mall, which I don't foresee that going anywhere anytime soon, but it definitely makes the old style malls very hard to stay open.
Yeah. And, they're talking about, there's articles up today about JCPenney's looking like 2020 might be the year that they go down for the count. I don't know if all of the Payless shoe stores are closed now, but Payless was closing down. And these are like your lower end types of retailers that speaks volumes to exactly how the nation is doing. Because it's not like Payless shoes is closing down because everybody can all of a sudden afford Nikes, right? It's because Payless shoes is closing down because they can't even afford Payless shoes, right? Yeah. So it's just not good overall when it comes to that there.
Wow. So, yeah, we got somebody says 3 cats that I had 4 major malls in Milwaukee. Now only 2 are half surviving. So it looks like a lot of people are recognizing this shift or change out of the old system into this new system, and it happens to be on the mall side. And so, well, yeah, that's very bad, man. That's very bad. AC Moore is closing where I'm at. Yeah. So anyway, but let's keep it moving right along. Appreciate you guys for sharing that and chiming in as to what you guys are seeing as well.
Let's keep it moving along. I want to talk about something that's bothering me. I've got a bad feeling about this because this really didn't make news yesterday, and it's that Trump tweet about Russia and Syria and Iran. I just want to hit on this for just 1 second because I put up a quick article yesterday and I said, is this like a false flag warning or something? So I'm going to read this tweet. I don't know if you have it up on the screen or not.
I do not. You talk about the article about joined by from the whitehouse.gov or no?
Well, that was whitehouse.gov. That's kind of related to it.
Okay, I'll put that up. Go ahead.
Okay, so you got the whitehouse.gov one up first?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just a reminder that, in April of 2018, I think we launched was it like 103 or 113 cruise missiles or something like that because of the gas attack in Syria.
Yeah.
And the gas attack supposedly killed dozens, right? Supposedly, I don't know what went on, but supposedly it killed 40 to 50 people. And we launched over 100 cruise missiles or Patriot missiles or something. But here's my point with that. So just yesterday, President Trump comes out with a tweet. You got to put this tweet up because this is wow, why didn't anybody say anything about this? So if we launched a missile strike over 40-some people dying, right? Just yesterday, President Trump said Russia, Syria, and Iran are killing or are on their way to killing thousands of innocent civilians. Mike, this is major war prep talk right there. Thousands. That's like a major international incident, because if we launched over 100 missiles for 40 and all of a sudden thousands of innocent civilians, this is not good. Kind of gives me a bad feeling going into the weekend as far as false flag elevation. Those spidey senses are tingling. Thoughts on that, Mike?
Interesting. That's very interesting. So I do have that tweet up here. And this comes on the fact that it looks like Russia and or China are ramping up their joint efforts in their combat preparation for whatever they have coming or going on. So once again, Iran is on the U.S.'s hit list, so it doesn't play well that Russia and China are buddying up and becoming partners with Iran and Syria. And then also, not long ago, I think it was last week or two, President Assad referenced that he wants to join the Belt and Road Initiative, and so he's looking for China to come in and help rebuild. And so it's like wherever the U.S. destroys, China or Russia is usually being brought in to help rebuild, and that doesn't fare well with the U.S. So any type of event to create a false narrative can be expected at this point. So I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, and also not surprising but sad, right? Is that this got no press whatsoever. Nobody said a word about this, and that's like setting something up for something very for an international incident that could really spark something off here just out of the blue. Yeah. I just found it amazing when I read that tweet. And then one more tweet, because we would be remiss if we didn't speak about some of President Trump's tweets. So this is another one. And this is the one that says, despite all the greatest success. But I'm just going to read this.
Yeah, go ahead. I got it up. Go ahead.
Despite all of the great success that our country has had over the last 3 years, it makes it much more difficult to deal with foreign leaders and others when I am constantly defending myself against the do-nothing Democrats and their bogus impeachment scam. Bad for the USA. The only thing I can think of is whatever happened to America first, right? I mean, isn't the focus, shouldn't this say, despite all the great, it makes it much more difficult to make America great again, or it makes it much more difficult to drain the swamp, or it makes it much more difficult to come to a trade deal, or it makes it much more difficult to bring any of these things, but no, to deal with foreign leaders, right? So, America first means, forget about the foreign leaders, right? Because you're dealing with America. So that was just a little thing that I had to throw out there as a mini rant. Mike, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Make America Great. I guess this is the new rebranding of Make America Great, is that continuation of getting involved in foreign affairs and all the things that come with that. So this upcoming year, man, it will be very interesting because not only will the Democratic side of things with this impeachment stuff and all the stuff that's going to come off of that, it's going to be so much noise out there in the midst of us having the greatest economy, the stock market rallying, Federal Reserve balance sheet at a new all-time high, and all that stuff like that. So yeah, it doesn't equal it doesn't end well, put it like that. Not to say the least.
Yeah, it doesn't. So that just brings me into the last kind of subject I wanted to bring up, was just kind of a market update in general. the dollar index, there's a lot of different ways to track the dollar. What I track the dollar with is the DXY. But just on the chart, just technically speaking, right, the dollar index is about to make a death cross. And death cross is when the 50-day moving average is crossed below, when the 50-day moving average crosses below the 200-day moving average. So that's very bearish, right? Because then the last 50 days are trading lower than the last 200 days. So you're in a decline at that point. This is literally about to be painted on the chart next week here. So it looks like the dollar's going down here. So all these dollar bulls out there, they got to be looking at this chart sweating bullets. So what does that mean for us? That means that in addition to, it means lots of things, right? Things are about to get more expensive because of devaluing of the dollar, right? A decline in the value of the dollar. It also means that should be supportive of gold and silver prices. Then another thing that I want to talk about in conjunction with the decline of the dollar is what's called a golden cross. And the golden cross is when the 50-day moving average crosses up and through the 200-day moving average. So what that means is the price for something over the last 50 days is higher than it's been over the last 200. So that's bullish. Now, what's about to have a golden cross, right? Copper, crude oil. So what does that mean? That means the price of copper is going up, the price of crude oil is going up. So what is my overall point here? My overall point here is this. On the charts set up right now, we are looking at a decline in the value of the dollar. We're looking at a rise in crude oil prices. We're looking at a rise in copper prices. So, bottom line is, if people were talking about deflation, the deflation cycle, I don't think that it was ever there, right? But if the deflation cycle was there, it's over now. The deflation cycle is over. Just like people say gold and silver bottomed at the end of 2015 and the beginning of 2016, well, the commodities have just bottomed right now. And I think it was a couple months ago with copper and crude oil there. So those are just some things that I'm seeing. And then on top of that, so I think that this can put another turbocharger into gold and silver to start the new year here, because also we have the euphoria in the stock market. So you got to be thinking some people are going to start thinking about taking a hedge here. And what's a way to hedge against that? That's moving into gold and silver. So people are going to start, people are caught off guard by the rally in the metals. Of course, we weren't, because we've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks. But people are now starting to say, oh, well, they're done. Silver's done. It's run up too far, too fast. I don't know. I think we could still get another move higher here coming into the new year. And we still have a few trading days left, so we'll have to see about that. So that's just a general market wrap there. Any kind of thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, so as you're talking, I was going to look at the prices, and so I see that it's above $18 right now for silver. So that's definitely, I'm sure, very favorable for those that are out there that pay attention closely to the price of that particular metal there. So what do you think? What do you foresee next month or two? Do you see it going to 19, 1850, or where do you see it where do you see it going price-wise? Where would you want to put it out there at?
Oh, I don't know. I'm hoping for 20 by the end of the year, but I don't think that's going to happen. But because remember, it moved that far in 7 days earlier in the year. So I was wrong about that. I was right about the rally, but wrong about the price. That's the thing, right? You can get one, but you can't really get two unless you have inside information, right? Sooner or later, you'll lose out to the market. But you can get one, but you can't get two. So you can get the direction, or you can get the timing, right? You can get like the direction, right? But you can't get the timing and the price both at the same time. So we know it's going higher. Just when is it going to be at $20? I think that they're going to start bringing the pain going into the new year, because if I'm right about Trump being the fall guy, and if I'm right about them bringing down the economy and ushering something worse than, Hillary would have ever been, then we're about to start feeling some economic pain. And why not ring in the new year when there's just complete and total euphoria in the stock market? So I'm optimistic about the metals here. I'm very pessimistic and very bearish about the economy in general, especially since we've gone through a full decade now with no recession, right? So the whole 2010 through 2020 was this miracle of growth, which, I think is a sham and wasn't really there. And if you want to talk about growth, and if we're talking about GDP and just spending in general, well, yeah, college tuition's up, healthcare's up, government's up. So there's growth in all the stuff that we don't want growing, right? So I think we can hit the gates running here for 2020, even though we kind of hit the gates running this week, but that's been expected. But I still think that the metals have room to run here.
So it looks like, you're saying basically this decade coming up, we're going to enter, it's going to be hard to keep this false narrative of an economic expansion going and the manipulation on the price of metals at what they've been for this last decade. So you're seeing an overall shifting of the economy while metals rallies to something we have not seen. So do you see I'm assuming you see the next decade all-time highs in silver and gold, basically.
Yeah,
or it'd be extremely hard to keep this current suppression of the real price down below what it should be.
No, it'll definitely be hard. I'd be looking at all-time highs next year. That would be a prediction of mine. But ultimately, I'm a believer in the reset. That a reset is coming. So obviously, we're going to get all-time highs before that. So I would think that we would have all-time highs next year. Now, I lost my train of thought there. So
it's all good. Oh man! All right, so let's check in with the chat real quick, and then we'll get ready to dial back as always. So it looks like we have a little bit over 300 or so people tuning in, so we appreciate you guys taking time with us this afternoon. And if you've enjoyed the back and forth or whatnot, don't be afraid to donate a thumbs up beneath this video here. And then we'll check into the chat, see if there's anything that's highlighted at Silver Doctors. And if there's anything you want us to address directly, we can do so. So let me see here. I don't see anything highlighted. Let me see anything worthy of bringing up. It's Russian-China naval drills, fake news. What do we got here? Patriot missiles cost $2.5 million each. So nobody highlighted anything in particular. So got a couple people throwing out their price predictions as well. Oh man! All right. So that being the case, everybody's been great hanging out this afternoon or soon to be afternoon. But with that being the case, we're back at it again on Monday, as we get ready to draw down towards the end of this past decade and entering into a new decade. So that being the case, Mr. Half Dollar, anything you want to leave us with before we dial back and call it quits for today?
No, just don't be surprised if something pops off in the Middle East this weekend, because that seed has been planted, right? President Trump planted that seed, right? So whether, some people are going to say, well, this is 4D chess and he's appealing to, the deep state, like, you better not do that or there's going to be consequences. But, if you look at it like I do from the angle that I think he's deep state in Patriots clothing, then it's a seed being planted for something to pop up.
Yeah.
So, this is one of those weekends in between Christmas and New Year's where people are still partying, they're still celebrating, they could get caught off by some major global geopolitical incident. So it might not be a good end to 2019, begin into 2020, especially when we see stuff like that, when we've fired off all those missiles for something way less than thousands, right? We're talking about dozens, caused hundreds of missiles to be fired off. What's thousands going to cause? Full-scale ground invasion or something? I don't know, but it doesn't look good. So I'll be watching the news and watching the markets when they open back up on Sunday evening, and anything to report, we'll be on it.
As always. So with that being the case, it's been great hanging out, and we'll dial back right there with that one. So with that being the case, have a good day, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you guys Monday, same time, same place. As always, invite a friend, and we'll see you then. All right, other than that, peace.